Your name is Alistar Sinclair.
Yeah.
You have a PhD. You've written 6 books, all about time, life, belief, words of support, Jesus of Nazareth, the will to live, the ubiquity of reciprocity. The last one's a bit of a mouthful. You're a philosopher.
So there's also all kinds of themes that come up.
Yeah, it's a nice mix you've got there.
And I'm not a great speaker, so I'm here practicing as it were, trying to be a better speaker.
Okay,
you know?
fantastic.
And this is my book as well.
Any of these that have come out? Oh, so is that the new one? Yeah, Life, Belief, a Faith for All.
The most popular one is the will to live.
The will to live.
That's sold 6 copies this month.
Really?
So 4 in this country and 4 in America just this month. So every month it is selling. So,
okay, fantastic.
But not very much. It's not a bestseller.
Well, you got to start somewhere, isn't it? And who knows? Maybe those 4 people, or those 4 here and 4 elsewhere, the 8 people that have read it, maybe they benefited from it. And I mean, that's your intention, right?
Yes.
I mean,
life. Believing in life is more important than believing in God. And if believing in life became the most dominant belief in the world, there'd be a lot less killing. That's the whole point of it. And believing in life is believing in life as science is telling us about life. The fact that we all started, every one of us here started as a tiny fertilized egg in a mother's womb, tiny, the size of a grain of salt. You could barely see it. And in that little cell was all the information that needed to become what we are. And it didn't need God, it didn't need a creator, it needed the right environment to get going, in the mother's womb and the nutrition.
But what's interesting, you mentioned the egg and the sperm, and we know the egg and the sperm is a cell that has a great deal of data. And from our inference and from our observations since time immemorial, we realize that anytime we see a great deal of information, typically there is an information giver. Like, it hasn't come by itself, hasn't come by chance. For example, if you go to a desert, you see a dictionary there, it holds a great deal of information there. Similarly, a DNA. The DNA. Yeah. So where do you think the information in the sperm has come from?
The key word is complexification. Now, right at the start of the universe, when it came about by chance or whatever, by quantum fluctuation or whatever.
Is that what you believe? Chance?
Particles came together to perform atoms, to form particles of atoms that became atoms and then became molecules. And the molecules complexified into more and more complex forms, giving the elements, the key elements, including carbon. And
let's rewind a little bit, Alistar, to the bit that you said at the beginning, which is that it all came from chance.
Well,
how do you define chance?
Well, I don't say it's chance. But it seems like what science is telling us is that there's an infinite amount of universes that have been created by.
Science doesn't tell us this. That's the multiverse theory, which is currently unproven. It's just a hypothesis.
That's the hypothesis.
So it's not science at the moment. It's someone's hypothesis.
Well, that makes sense of the universe having the exact processes of the atomic forces, the gravitation. All these forces came into being at the same time as the universe. Now, if there's infinite amount of universes coming to being, they would all have different processes, and they couldn't produce life. But we happen to be.
But that doesn't solve the problem. For example, if correct me if I'm wrong, your theory is this: that when you look at the fine tuning that we have in this universe, it has only come to be because there have been thousands of other universes. And this is one of those universes that we have finely tuned life, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't explain why there is fine tuning. I'll give you an example. Somebody that is standing in front of a shooting squad, and there's like 20 of them, and they are all shooting at him, and they all miss. Yeah, and then he's asked how is it that you survived? And he goes, the mere fact that I am here shows that I have survived and that I exist. And the person goes, yes, that's fair enough. But why is it that all of them missed? So similarly, when you say that this universe has fine-tuning, the question arises, why is there fine-tuning? Merely extrapolating it into a multiverse and saying that just the mere fact that we exist, we would not have existed otherwise, that's why there is fine-tuning, is more circular reasoning, and it doesn't deal with the issue of fine-tuning. So the question I guess I would ask is, because multiverse is currently unproven, if we stick with the things that are proven, why and how would you say all of this has come to be? And how would you define chance?
Well, to me, the universe is meaningless without life. Life, in a way, has come into being so that there is something rather than nothing. The alternative to life is nothing. And if we don't exist, then the universe didn't exist, because it needs life in order to know that the universe exists, you know?
So you're saying if we didn't exist, the universe wouldn't exist?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Because
But surely the universe existed for billions of years and there was no life. That's the Big Bang Theory, right?
yeah,
That we are only millions of years old, but the universe is billions of years old. So it did function without human beings.
yeah, that's our knowledge, our scientific knowledge of the universe. Therefore, but the point is that in order for the universe to have meaning at all, life has come into being in order to ensure that the universe has meaning at all. No, without life, there's nothing.
So how would you deal with the answer, even before there are human beings and meaning, when we're dealing with matter and the start of the universe and the start of it all? You said chance. Do you believe in that it came with chance, or do you believe it came from nothing?
It's evolution, isn't it?
No, evolution is to do with living organisms, not inorganic matter.
Well, no, you can apply evolution to the universe, the processes of the universe, and this is where complexification comes in. Because more and more complex elements come into being. On Earth, amino acids and DNA came into being by complexification, and eventually self-subsistent living beings came into being on Earth. And this is all the processes, the combination of all the complexification processes of the universe.
But what theory is this? I mean, we do know that there is an established theory at this moment in time called the evolution theory, but an evolution theory to do with the universe is something I haven't heard of before.
Have you heard of Debunks? Debunks. He was a Jesuit priest, and one of his principal books is The Phenomenon of Man, and he introduces the word complexification. And he does it from a Christian point of view, because he makes out that the end of the universe is Jesus. You know, Jesus is going to be the combination of complexification. You know, because he was an anthropologist, and he discovered Peking man skulls when he was in China as a missionary.
So he didn't believe in chance, right?
Well, he believed in evolution, but from a Christian point of view, amazing. And
So what do you believe? How did it all begin?
I believe in life. The fact that, you know, to me, I came out of nothing, and at death, I go into nothing. And I'm not worried about my death, because it makes my life important, more important. You know, it's more vital than ever that I should enjoy the life that I have while I'm living.
Okay, so Alistar, work with me here. If today, God forbid, you're standing here and somebody puts a bag over your head, yeah? Puts you in the back of a van, and then you get these bumps and movements, and then you end up on a fast train. The bag gets taken off, yeah? Someone's offering you a 5-course meal, but what would you ask before consuming that 5-course meal? It's the most fundamental question you would ask at that moment in time.
what's going on?
What's going on?
Yeah.
More fundamental than that? On a train, you're on a train. The bag's been taken off. The first question would be,
Well,
where am I going, right? You agree with that?
well,
And why am I here?
one of the questions, yeah.
So where and why, Alistar, is something more fundamental than the meal that's been put in front of you, that you are indulging in, that are being appreciated by your senses. Something even more fundamental than that is the where and the why. Yeah? Why am I here? Where am I going? Yeah? How did I get here? These are very fundamental questions. And indeed, purpose and intentionality is important. But what I'm saying is, when we're dealing with the universe, something even more fundamental than that is, where did it come from?
Well, it already explained it. Science gives us.
But I want to know what you think, Alistar.
I think that.
Is it chance or nothing?
Well, there's a certain. Well, there's a great amount of chance. I mean, the fact of being here is living. It's willing. It's.
Alistar,
No,
let me just break it down for you. Let me just help you out.
it's winning the lottery several times over.
Okay, so chance, right?
Yeah, well, there's chance involved. But that makes your life all the more important because you've won the lottery all several times over. More, the chances of you not being here are more incredible and unbelievable. And this makes life more important because the chances of my parents not meeting, the chances of all sorts of things not happening.
Alistar, let's just say,
more important.
I get that. But in our daily life, when we see something that is incredibly, low probability, typically we do not take the low probability, we take the high probability. For example, if a person does a DNA test to check if it's their son or not, yeah, they go to, the clinic and they tell them, the son is yours 95%. 5% is not yours. He's going to say, yes. He's not mine. He goes, no. 5% is not yours. I know. 5%. You say, what about the 95%? So in science, you're probably more aware than I am, there's something called abduction, the inference to the best explanation, yeah? So the inference to the best explanation is that we go with the inference to the best explanation. If 95% it says that he is your son, he is your son. So if 95+% we're told that the universe is incredibly intricate, yeah, we have things 1 in 10 to the power of 16. You talked about the atomic, the fine tuning. If you look at the nuclear strong force and the electromagnetic force, the ratio of it is within 1 in 10 to the power of 16, incredibly precise. The contraction forces, in fact, the forces at the beginning when the universe was expanding and the forces pushing it in to contract, those forces have to be 1 in 10 to the power of 50. Alistar, incredibly precise. According to our own principles of reasoning, we say if something is incredibly precise and it indicates design, then the inference to the best explanation is there is a designer. I'll give you an example. If, Alistar, you go into your kitchen, yeah, and you see a cup of tea on the table. Hypothesis 1.
This is a watchmaker's argument.
But
Richard Dawkins had a whole book about the watchmaker.
But here's the thing, Richard Dawkins calls it the blind watchmaker. He still accepts the watchmaker, but he says it's the blind watchmaker, yeah? But the argument that, you've got Dennis Noble, the people that, Dennis Noble was actually an individual that when Dawkins was writing a paper, he was one of the people overseeing it. They had a debate very recently as well, and it was a very damning debate for a lot of these evolutionists. So even when you look at the blind watchmaker, Dennis Noble will extrapolate this and say the one-eyed watchmaker. Yeah, so this analogy can somewhat be changed, but let's just say we take it forward. you see this cup of tea, Alistar. In your daily experience, in your daily life, would you conclude that it was made by the air coming in, throwing the saucer down, then the cup coming in, then by chance the kettle turning on and then tilting at the right angle, water going in, then a chimpanzee from Uganda or Timbuktu comes in and fly kicks the cupboard and the tea bag lands in, and then a sloth from the second ice age comes in and he adds milk? And what sounds more plausible, that or most likely somebody came in, I don't know who, but somebody came in and made the tea?
Yeah, well, so what? I mean,
No, which of the two makes more sense?
well, I'm thinking of you're trying to extrapolate that to the origins of the universe. So there has to be a designer producing the precise atomic, the atomic forces.
Yeah, but
You've described already.
yeah, but I'm doing it based upon the principle of sufficient reason of Leibniz, which is something that we apply everywhere. It's something so integral and important to science, philosophy, that you look towards as well. Without the principle of sufficient reason, Alistar, we have nothing. So again, which of the two do you think sounds more plausible? Someone making it, which is the inference of the best explanation, or it? Yeah. So do you think that the universe, what's more plausible? That it came by chance over billions and billions of years when everything just happened to come in the right order that we're here? Or that there is an intelligence behind this immense amount of information?
Is that science is more and more marginalizing the God, the creator. And now we've got a way back to the origins of the universe. So we're trying to talk about the processes, the atomic processes. Now, this is how far back you're going. Before it used to be that God was in the heavens. There he was. But this is the God of the gaps.
But what science tends to use is chance of the gaps. Anytime it doesn't have an explanation, it just fits chance in there and says, yeah, we don't know. Oh, natural selection by mutation, oh, chance. Oh, the Big Bang and the design that we see, chance.
Chance is involved with everything.
What is chance?
Well, chance is when something happens when we don't know the causes.
We don't know. So chance, technically, it's just an explanation of a process that we don't know. You believe in determination, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't believe in free will. You believe.
No, I believe in free will.
Okay, you don't believe that we could, if we had knowledge of all of the forces, that we could determine what would happen next?
No, I don't, because there again, science comes to our aid because of quantum. Things are happening at the quantum area, which are unpredictable.
No, they're unpredictable, according to our understanding, right? If we knew the kind of microenvironments, would you agree that we would know the movements of the atoms?
No, we wouldn't. That's a whole point of indeterminacy in the quantum field. And it's at that level where free will is possible because of and my belief is that consciousness is wrapped up, involved with it, and very much in the quantum level. And this is where free will comes from.
You use the word belief. Is the term belief scientific or non-scientific?
Well, it's scientific if, it's everything in science is not absolute. There's always a possibility of fine-tuning, always a possibility of finding a better explanation. And this is exactly the open-mindedness of science that religion tends not to have, because religion will refer to the scriptures or refer to revelation, God telling them what to do or to think.
Religion ultimately refers back to an individual. Science ultimately refers back to an individual. They both go back to an individual. Religions tend to go back to the individual of God, not the human being type individual, the individual, the necessary existence that we term a God. In science, ultimately, it will go to a scientist's explanation, a scientist's research, a scientist's hypothesis of the universe. So ultimately, it goes back to an individual who has knowledge, and we rely on their testimony. So that goes into something else. But my question was more fundamental than that, which is that when you're talking about chance, firstly, what example would you give me of chance in our everyday life?
Well, the chance of you coming here and starting to talk to me, I could never have predicted that I'd get a confirmation like this in front of cameras. So
What if we knew the intent? You were told, and there was a scientist that was looking at the different variables governing me, variables governing you. Do you think that they would be able to tell you that I would be coming to you if they could tell the variables?
no, obviously not. This is the whole point of science. It's even though it's individuals that are coming up with this stuff, they're doing it objectively in such a way as, this is what I think. What do you think? This is what I've discovered. Is this correct? If it's not correct, you can find out whether it's correct or not. That's the whole point of science. Is objective, and that other people can come along and criticize and find.
Do you believe it's subjective? I mean, you've done a PhD. I'm sure you're aware that, on the outside it's deemed as something objective, but it relies on a lot of subjective factors. Firstly, the people conducting the science, conducting the data, where they choose to gather the information, who is watching over them, who's funding, where the funding is coming from. So I would argue, as many people have, science may on paper be deemed as objective, however the way it's carried out is far from objective. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, this is the point about all human beliefs, and that applies. One of the things I'm against, or fighting against in my writings, is extremism, dogmatism, taking beliefs too seriously, and that can apply as much as science. I mean, science is littered with people that thought they had the answer and didn't have the answer. I mean, for instance, was it Lysenko or something, the Russian scientists that came up with biological beliefs that have since been refuted. You know,
Levchenko?
I think that's the guy. Yeah. So there's always, science is open-minded. That's the whole point of science. It's always moving forward. We're trying to,
What you're doing is you're anthropomorphizing science. When science itself relies upon human beings, it relies on organizations to fund it, which ultimately places a question mark on science. Yes, science may endeavor to be as objective as possible. However, for example, I'm sure you're well aware that even the cigarettes initially, they were being promoted initially by scientists. I mean, Bernays himself. Yeah, so scientists were used.
Science can go wrong.
Exactly, absolutely.
Religion can never go wrong because it's all written down in the scripture. You can't argue against it.
I mean, I would say that Islam is different to Christianity in the sense that Christians don't have access to the original text. So because they don't have, no Christian in their right mind would claim to have access to the original. As Muslims, we do, because of...
You don't. Look at the history of the Quran. The Quran was originally written in bits of paper. You know, the Prophet says something and somebody wrote it down, and then it was gathered together in Baghdad. So, I mean, there's great doubts about what he was really saying, what he really meant.
Baghdad when?
Well, I'm going into the history of the thing, but I know it's not as certain as it's made out to be.
It definitely is. I'll tell you why. What you're referring to, Alistar, is it's a theory it has been in the literature, but it's been long refuted after the dawn of not only manuscripts, but carbon dating as well. So what you're referring to is that the Quran was compiled in the 9th century in Baghdad by somebody called Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. That's something long been debunked. In fact, the status questionus at this moment in time is that you can systematically trace the Quran back to the time of Osman and to the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So that's in terms of thematics, yeah, and stemology. If we do it in terms of manuscripts, the earliest manuscript is currently the University of Birmingham, and is dated to the time of the Prophet, and it's been carbon dated by the University of Oxford. This is unique, Alistar, only to the Islamic religion. Jews don't claim to have a manuscript dating to the time of Moses. Christians do not claim to have a manuscript dating to the time of Jesus. Nay, not even to the time of the authors of the Gospels. But in Quran we do. So that's evidence number one, Alistar. And evidence number two is the Quran is actually mass memorized from cover to cover, from the beginning till now, and we have chains of narration. This is something unheard of in the Old and New Testament. That's why there is a bit of a difference here, Alistar. So coming back to the chants.
Also the most boring book ever written in human history. You know, that would be the criticism. The most boring book ever written, and repetitive. Not
Which book?
the Quran.
What makes you say that, Alistar?
Because that's a common opinion. I mean, read what Thomas Carlyle says about it.
Carlyle?
Yeah.
Thomas Carlyle struggled to read books. Of course he's going to find it boring. The thing is, Alistar, I mean, boring is not an academic argument. Yeah. If we are to stick true to objectivism and science and accurate facts, boring is something I can come along, and I wouldn't say this, but I mean, boring is something I can flick through your book. I can say that's incredibly boring. But that would be presumptuous and disrespectful of me. What I should do is, I should endeavor, if I read your book and I don't understand it, or if I do become bored, maybe my intellectual capability is not at the PhD level of Alistar. Maybe I need to sit with him and find out where it's coming from. You know, even they're giving me a round of applause, you know. But it's the same with the Quran, Alistar. Sometimes certain people just lack the intellectual prowess to understand it, or the unbiased nature to read it, or they are just doing it with the backdrop of...
I've got 4 copies of the Quran at home, you know, and all give it a different interpretation of the thing in English.
Okay, those 4 copies, yeah? Do any of those 4 copies differ when it comes to how many gods there are?
Oh.
One God, right?
Well, yeah.
All 4, yeah? Do all of them say that the final prophet is the Prophet Muhammad?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Do all of them say that we should respect our parents, go for pilgrimage, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal? Do all of them say that?
They all say, chop off the head of the unbeliever.
Where does it say that?
Well, in more or less the same words. It's, chop off the hand.
Okay, let's stick with your first example. What does it say with the verse before that? That when you see the non-believer, kill them. What does it say with the verse before that?
Well, I don't know.
Well, being a PhD, Alistar, I feel embarrassed to lecture you on this because you know about this more than me. However, if you just paired to one sentence before and one sentence after, that's all I ask. The sentence before tells you the context, which is war. And the sentence after says if someone is not fighting you, don't fight with them. As somebody that's, academic, I'm sure you should look at the context.
Well, the context doesn't make any difference. I mean, in fact, you mentioned war.
What do you expect people to do in war, Alistar?
The Islamic tradition, there's a quote.
What do you expect people to do in war?
Have you ever read John Buchan's The Green Mantle by Green Jean? That was about a jihad.
I did. It was a very boring book.
Well, he says that near the beginning, the mullah stands in the pulpit with a Quran in one hand and a sword in the other hand. And that is sums up how Islam has been throughout the centuries. It's been a warlike religion imposing itself on whole peoples.
So this is somebody...
Even more than Christianity.
Okay. So this is an individual who's written a book, yeah? Do you have any studies, or has he presented any studies to back this?
No, the point is...
Because look, Alistar, the point is, Alistar, you're somebody with a PhD. You know that when you're making a statement, merely appealing to authority is fallacious. Yeah. Now I'm asking for evidence. I will give you evidence. That's why I'm asking you for evidence. So when you state that Islam has been responsible for majority of the killings, I expect you as an academic to give me some academic backing.
The whole history of Islamic tradition, Islamic expansion through North Africa.
Give me data.
The dates are obvious. I mean, the dates from the Prophet Muhammad, the 7th century onwards, Islam has been an aggressive.
Why is it starting? Why is it starting?
Bloodthirsty.
Why has this? Firstly,
wiping out whole villages of Jews. That's historically accurate.
Am I correct to assume you don't have any study to back what you've just said, right?
Well, this is what I've been reading in all the...
Where can I check this reading of yours?
What speak on Islam? I've got umpteen books that I refer to.
So this is another authority you're referring to, right?
I remember everything. I remember...
You've written, was it 5 books? If you're making certain claims and you're especially espousing certain moral truths, Alistar, with the utmost respect, it's very important for us to be as objective and as precise as possible. Yeah? I will give you a study and then you let me know what you think, because I pressed you for a study, you haven't given me one, you've just appealed to authority. There is a study that was done from the year 0 to 2008. It looked at all of the killings that were done in the name of religion and religious people. Yeah? It was a quantitative study. What the study concluded, and you can check the data, it's in a book called War and Peace. Yeah, that's where the study has been expounded upon and all the data is there for you to go and check. They concluded that at the top, number 1, with a whopping 171 million deaths, was Christianity. Number 2, not Islam. Number 3, not Islam. Number 4, not Islam. Number 5, not Islam. Islam came at number 6. With 30 million. You compare 171 million with 30 million. My question is, how is it that anyone in their right mind looking at the data, somebody that's come from an academic background, how on earth can they come to this conclusion? It's beyond me.
Who was doing the study? And what religion was the person doing this?
You didn't tell me that with the author of the book. You told me before, Watt or Carlyle. You didn't tell me about their details. You merely appealed to authority, you made the sweeping statement, and then you moved on. But when it comes to the study this is a study I've given you. Now you're very interested in the intricacies. Now this is something you can check. Yeah, you can check the book War and Peace, and then you can check the data in there. You can check the timings. In fact, I can show you, I've got the graphs with me right now. We can go over it, no problem. And I can give you a study that was done by CAIR, CARE, and the University of California. Yeah, they did a joint study from 2008 to 2013. That $200 million have been spent trying to disparage the religion of Islam. And this has come from at least 72 quote-unquote organizations, such as the Henry Jackson Society and the likes. And these try to masquerade as think tanks. And this is where a lot of misinformation that you see will be coming out from. And I implore, of course, the viewers to check the data when it comes to, oh, Muslims are doing this and Muslims are doing that, because Pape is somebody that's done an extensive study even on Iraq. And he said in his book, Dying to Win, it's pretty much all data in there. Yeah, PAPE, PAPE. Robert Pape. He said before the invasion of Iraq by the Americans or the Western countries, there was not a single suicide attack. The literacy was 90% plus. Thereafter, now the literacy is as low as 5%. Half of the population, because of the depleted uranium, are riddled with cancer. There was depleted, I said depleted uranium, but white phosphorus that burnt through the skin.
Well, I agree. Iraq should never have been invaded by Britain.
No, but the example that I'm giving you is what the academic Karen Armstrong has expounded upon in her book.
Where I find your whole attitude totally frightening, because your attitude is Islam is the answer to everything.
Yeah, I believe so.
And there we must end, because
No, but you need to
I don't
look.
have any answer to that.
Look, as if you don't have an answer to that, and you're here, you know, talking about your numerous books that have been written and talking about your
Well,
accolades.
it's a frightening thing. I mean, it's going to end up with a war of the West against Islam.
No, but it's frightening that you are quoting
weird.
passages of the Quran without looking at the verse before and after, expounding that we are told to kill people when the verse before clearly tells you it's in war, and the verse after says that if someone's not fighting you, you don't fight back with them. But still, you are very confident that you're quoting a passage from the Quran, and you haven't apologized saying, you know what, I should have read more about this. I apologize for taking this verse out of context.
Because the thing, you're talking about the war, because the passage mentions war as being a normal kind of thing. And
I didn't say war is a normal kind of thing. What I'm saying is if somebody fights with you, you fight back. You don't lie down like the Native Americans did, and then now they're taken over and being shunted to the corners of America where, you know, people, you know, use them every now and then as trophies. Well, the Native Americans tried that. Where did it get them? The Africans tried that. They were enslaved for centuries.
oh well, there's no arguing with you, because you're right and I'm wrong.
Well, there you go then. Well, if that's your answer, when I'm bringing facts and you give ayahs, verses out of context, you don't bring studies, and then when I do the courtesy of bringing and educating you on this, despite having a PhD, you turn around and say, well, there's no winning, then Islam's going to do this. I mean, with all due respect, like, what are you doing here at Speaker's Corner then? If you can't hold a simple debate with somebody that is giving you context, you should be thanking me for educating you on this.
Well, thank you for the attention, and that's something.
Well, hopefully you will go back, you will look at what I've said, and you will come back and we can have a fruitful conversation with this, rather than more verses out of context.
You're right and I'm wrong, whatever.
Well, thank you. I'm just going to take the microphone, yeah?
Right.
Thank you for your time, Alistar.
Yeah, thank you for the stimulating conversation.
Yes. Hopefully you can use your academia on Islam as well next time, and not just on things that benefit you.
Who won it? Who won the debate?
Huh?
Who won it?
Who do you think?
Who won it?
Who do you think?
He won that. At the moment, he's undefeated.
He's won the debate. Yeah, he's won. He's, look at him. He's got a smile on his face.
No winning.
We let him win.
He's being humble. He's being humble in victory.